गच्छाम त्वावहुधा जातवेदः प्रविष्टमग्ने अप्सूषधीषु तं त्वायमो यचिकेतचित्रभानु दशान्तरुष्यात् यतिरोचमानम्।
In the enigma of the dark and vast, in the passion and self-loss of the infinite, when all was plunged in the negating void, non-being's night could never have been saved if being had not plunged into the dark, carrying with it its triple mystic cause.
महत्तदुर्वं सविरं तथासित् येनाविष्टितः प्रविवेशितापः विश्वाय पश्यामि बहुधा ते अग्ने जातवेदस्तन्नो देवैकः गच्छाम त्वावहुधा जातवेदः प्रविष्टमग्ने अप्सूषधीषु तं त्वायमो यचिकेतचित्रभानु दशान्तरुष्यात् यतिरोचमानम्।
Good morning, everyone. We're reading in Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds. And we're in Canto 4, the Kingdoms of the Little Life, on page 147. We're at line 536. So we have seen that Aswapati has been undergoing this sadhana, the yoga, and he's reached a very high peak of consciousness, and he's looking within into the inner worlds, the inner planes of consciousness, and he's journeying through these planes of consciousness, looking for the key to Earth's change, transformation. And as he journeys through these worlds, which range in a hierarchy from matter up to the highest peaks of the spirit. He begins at the lower levels, first at the kingdoms of subtle matter. So at a inner realm that is very close to our physical matter, but it's a subtle matter. And he explores there and finds a kind of perfection of form, of beauty and harmony of form. But he doesn't find what he's looking for. He continues on his journey into the realms of life, the life principle. And now he's journeying through the kingdoms of the little life. So this is life as it's just emerging out of matter. So we see the very beginnings of the emergence of life from matter in this canto. And already he's gone through a couple of layers of this realm of the little life, and now he's come into a third phase of it, in which there's the beginnings of the glimmering of mind, just the very early start of a mental consciousness, very rudimentary as yet, but something that is beginning to look out at the world around it in this kind of stream of life that has been going on. So I'll just read, we just started with this section on starting on page 146 last time, and I'm just going to read that first paragraph there that we read last time to take us to where we are now. It says, "A third creation now revealed its face. A mold of body's early mind was made. A glint of light kindled the obscure world force. It dowered a driven world with the seeing idea, and armed the act with thought's dynamic point. A small thinking being watched the works of time. A difficult evolution from below called a masked intervention from above. Else this great, blind, inconscient universe could never have disclosed its hidden mind, or even in blinkers worked in beast and man, the intelligence that devised the cosmic scheme." So this idea of a masked intervention is important here. And last time I read a passage from Shraddhavan about this, in which he explained that at each major step of the evolution, there is a descent from above of a force, of a higher force, into the emerging evolution that makes possible its further development into the next stage. So here too, at this stage in which there are the first glimmerings of mind, there is this intervention from above of something that comes down into the struggling evolution. So from there we will begin. Dhanalakshmi.
At first, he saw a dim, obscure mind power, moving concealed by matter and dumb life. A current thin, it streamed in life's vast flow, tossing and drifting under a drifting sky. Amid the surge and glimmering tremulous wash, released in splash of sense, and feelings waves. In the deep midst of an insentient world, its huddled waves and foam of consciousness ran, pressing and eddying through a narrow strait, carrying experience in its crowded pace. It flowed, emerging into upper light from the deep pool of its subliminal birth to reach some high existence still unknown. There was no thinking self, aim there was none. All was unorganized stress and seekings vague. Only to the unstable surface rose sensations, stabs, and edges of desire, and passion sleeps and brief emotions cries. A casual colloquy of flesh with flesh, a murmur of heart to longing, wordless heart. Glimmerings of knowledge with no shape of thought, and jets of subconscious will are hunger's pulse.
Thank you. We see that the life is imaged as a body of water, like an ocean with waves and flows of water, of life in the water. And we see that this first glimmerings of mind rise as if from below the surface, from the subliminal depths below the threshold of awareness, from the deep pool of its subliminal birth. So something is as if rising up from below the surface, but still it's a very rudimentary kind of awareness. No thinking self, no aim, just seekings vague, stress and seekings vague, sensations, stabs and edges of desire, passions, leaps, brief emotions, cries. Glimmerings of knowledge, with still no shape of thought. Jets of subconscious will or hunger's pulls. It's as if the life energy is still very much prominent and in control, but there's beginning to be some awareness, at least, of what's happening. Yeah, colloquy is a dialogue or conversation. So there's a meeting of one being with another, a conscious interaction with other beings. But it's still very much at the physical level. and a murmur of heart to longing, wordless heart. So at some emotional level, perhaps also, there is this interaction between beings that's becoming conscious now. So we continue. Madam, would you like to read? Yes. All was dim sparkle.
All was dim sparkle on a foaming top. It whirled around a drifting shadow self on an inconscient flood of force in time. Then came the pressure of a seeing power that drew all into a dancing, turbid mass, circling around a single luminous point, center of reference in a conscious field, figure of a unitary light within. It lit the impulse of the half-sentient flood. Even an illusion gave a fixity, as if a sea could serve as a firm soil. That strange observing power imposed its sight. It forced on flux a limit and a shape. It gave its stream a lower, narrowed bank, drew lines to snare the spirit's formlessness. It fashioned the life-mind of bird and beast, the answer of the reptile and the fish, the primitive pattern of the thoughts of man.
Thank you. Let's pause. So we see here the beginnings of that masked intervention from above, imposing a kind of power on this flow of life and beginnings of conscious life. So then came the pressure of a seeing power that drew all into a dancing, turbid mass, circling around a single luminous point, center of reference in a conscious field. It's as if in this flow of water or of life, there come little eddies, little circling swirls of life that become centered around a point, a luminous point, a conscious point in that sense. So there's the beginnings of a center of reference, of an egoistic or a center of being, individual being.
Turbid means muddy.
Turbid?
Turbid.
Yes, yes.
Or is it a thought that some seeing power is there other than himself? I'm just thinking, what is this reference point, center reference point, at this point of evolution? So is it the sense of something is seeing you, like we say in the beginning, seeing power?
It's not quite the seeing power, but it's that seeing power is kind of creating this point. Yeah, that pressure of the power is creating an individuality in this flow of life.
It's the start of ego sense.
Yes.
Why is this called sin?
The power is coming from above. That's the intervention from above. So that is, it's a pressure of the mind plane on the life so that the mind can emerge within life.
Something coming from above.
It's coming from above. It's a conscious power.
It's a mass intervention.
Yeah. The life itself is not conscious of this intervention. It doesn't understand what's happening. Yeah, and it's the life principle. Oh, light. Yeah, figure of a unitary light within. So this point of reference, this point within the circling eddy of life, is a figure of this, of a higher light. So it's a representation of it or something. Maybe an emanation of it. Yeah. So in some sense, it suggests almost that this egoistic point that's forming is a representation of something, of a deeper individuality, of a divine individual. And it seems that that power is forcing a kind of limitation of perception, of living within that flow of life. It's creating an individuality, a limited individuality.
This line 561 that came with Canto, you see power. It is that this always happens, as you mentioned also before, happens again and again. It's a new impetus. No?
At each stage of the evolution, when there's another step being made. So here we're seeing the beginnings of mind in life. So it's a major step. Shall we continue, Eva?
A finite movement of the infinite came winging its way through a wide air of time.
No, that's correct. Correct.
Oh, it forced on flux a limit and a shape. It gave its stream a lower narrow bank, drew lines to snare the spirit's formlessness. It fashioned the life mind of bird and beast. the answer of the reptile and the fish, the primitive pattern of the thoughts of man, the finite movement of the infinite, came winging its way through a wide air of time. A march of knowledge moved in this science, and guarded in the form a separate soul. Its right to be immortal it reserved, but built a wall against the siege of death, and threw a hook to clutch eternity. A thinking entity appeared in space. A little order world broke into view, where being had prison room for act and sight, a floor to walk, a clear but scanty range. An instrument personality was born, and a restricted clamped intelligence consented to confine in narrow bounds. Its seeking, it tied the thought to visible things, prohibiting the adventure of the unseen and the soul's thread through unknown infinities.
Thank you. So a thinking being is entering into this flow of life. He suggests it's a soul. I think it may be like a mental being, a Purusha, which is also a soul, but at this mental level, it's conscious. I think it's the descent of the mental being into nature. This mental Purusha, representative of the soul at this level of nature, at the mental level of nature. So it's entering into the manifestation and becoming a being here and creating for itself an instrumental personality. Yeah. Okay, but there's also a difference between the soul and the nature.
Yeah, seeing power is what you're saying, the mental being which is putting the pressure on this level of life and creating it.
And he says, a finite movement of the infinite came winging its way through a wide air of time, a march of knowledge moved in nescience and guarded in the form, a separate soul. Its right to be immortal it reserved. So the soul is an immortal being. It's coming into the nature, creating around itself an instrumental personality to express it. That is still a very rudimentary life mind, a very beginnings of a mental being.
Isn't he making the parallel with the animals, the reptiles, the birds? So what's happening there, that automatic so-called system is being surpassed into the mental part of the human. The reptiles already crawled out of the swamp. The fish is already starting to breathe.
Let's see what.
The answer is really the answer.
So let's see what Shraddhavan has to say here. So are we speaking about those first 4 lines? She says, this sentence seems to describe how a separate soul could begin to inhabit a material body. A finite movement of the infinite seems to separate itself from the vast formlessness of infinite possibility to come winging its way like a bird through the air into the realm of time and space, the realm of limitation, definitions, individual existences, carrying with it some higher light so that a march of knowledge could begin to move forward in the mindless state of nescience, of no knowledge. That finite movement of the infinite could establish and protect a separate soul in a material form. This first conscious individuality is not yet claiming the immortality it is destined to enjoy at a later stage of its development, but it is able to establish a lasting individual existence, building a protective wall against the siege of death, the attacks and pressures of the surrounding environment, which is constantly tending to consume and dissolve it. It threw a hook to clutch eternity, to establish a connection with its everlasting origin. As a result of this process, this pressure of a strange observing power on the first disordered flux of mental consciousness, there is a new development. And then she quotes that a thinking entity appeared in space. Asopati observes the emergence of an entity, an individualized being, which can think, creating its own small, orderly worldview. This is still very limited, providing only a restricted prison room within which it can see and act. But it does give to the being a floor to walk on and a defined range or scope for its perception and action. But that scope, though clear, is still scanty, very poor and inadequate. Asopati sees that in this way an instrument personality is born, an appearance of individual existence which can be used by the mind power as an instrument, a tool for exploration and development. In it, a restricted, clamped intelligence, a limited form of intelligence which is restricted in its movements, clamped, held tightly within its limitations, accepts to limit its search for knowledge, tying down its thought power within the narrow bounds of what can be seen and touched. It does not yet allow the consciousness to undertake the adventure of the unseen or permit the soul to explore the unknown infinities which are its destined field. So anyway, it seems that we see the beginning of a being descended into this nature and developing the first limited range of an aware existence, self-aware existence.
So the sense of eternity has come at that stage or not? You're saying reserved this thing, so it's not clear. Reserve means who reserved it, or the soul? Or...
It's the soul that has descended into this form of nature, which has evolved, and it has kind of, through its pressure, has developed this instrumental personality. That soul is expressing itself through that, but still it holds back its full power, its full awareness, and it's only just allowing the first brief, limited glimmerings of knowledge and perception and touch, just what can be felt and touched and explored around the physical being. But it holds within itself the potentialities that are yet to come.
Maybe there's the oppositions of the flow of life, that is the protection, because of the war before. Flow of life already there.
Yeah, the life forces are there, and they're also impinging on that instrumental personality around it, so constantly threatening it. But it's protecting this being. Yeah, it's creating a conscious separation, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's keeping its tie to the origin from which it came. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but it's keeping this hook. I mean, it has a link kind of with this eternity. Yeah, and I look at it in terms of rebirth. So this being will be reborn. It keeps its eternity, but through the process of rebirth. Yes. Yeah, but that same individuality keeps that thread from one life to the next. Yeah. It's interesting that he uses that. It seems to be perhaps this immortal being is descending into time and space, into this realm of nature, to take up its place here, to take up a being within this nature, an individualized existence here. So it's coming from beyond, but it's entering into space and time. This is that descent again, that masked intervention from above. Rani, would you like to continue? A reflex reason.
A reflex reason, nature habits glass, illumined life to know and fix its field, accept a dangerous, ignorant brevity, and the inconclusive purpose of its walk, and profit by the hour's precarious chance in the allotted boundaries of its fate. A little joy and knowledge satisfied this little being tied into a knot and hung on a bulge of its environment, a little curve cut off in measureless space, a little span of life in all vast time. A thought was there that planned, a will that strove, but for small aims within a narrow scope, wasting unmeasured toil on transient things. It knew itself a creature of the mud. It asked no larger law, no loftier aim. It had no inward look, no upward gaze.
Thank you. Let's pause.
It gives me the idea of a cocoon that hangs from a branch of a tree, and it is in space, and it's about to be born, but it's barely conscious of its condition. And it's called cocoon. I don't know how to explain, just reading this in a poetic form, it's giving the idea that the human is just hanging at the edge of the universe, like,
Yeah.
something that's about to turn into a butterfly, but it's not yet.
See, there's a small cell in a vast universe, subdivided, a very small pocket of the universe. It is thinking only very limited, viewed and thought, and in a very, very limited space. Very small pocket.
Yeah, but it's also a poetic thing, so I guess in each and one of us can get intuitions of different, the poems we got,
He seems to be describing.
Beyond what is really, the actual practical.
He seems to be describing this animal type of mind. So it's just the beginnings of that. He calls it a reflex reason, nature habits glass. So here, reason, it's almost just reflecting the habits of nature. So whatever nature is carrying out repetitiously, it's observing that, is able to see that, and gives it kind of a ordered perception of what's going on around it. So it's a very primitive reason yet. It's not a real thoughtful one. It could be human, it could be animal. I mean, it could be both. A very primitive human existence still. Yeah, it's a. Remember that this kind of began in this flow of water, and there was an eddy, a kind of a circular motion within the water that was circling around a luminous point, right? So this is a mind that's like that. It's just a kind of a formation within the flow of life that's becoming conscious, though, becoming aware of itself as an individuality. But now, and it's now even beginning to emerge from that and beginning to look around and meet other beings within the next to it and respond to them at some level. But that's kind of that's the scope of its existence still. It doesn't go very far beyond that. It still is not looking within itself to understand who it is. It's not looking for the laws of nature yet and try to understand this whole process in any way. That's still a later development that will come with mind. But at this point, that's not there yet.
I think we have to change our consciousness. This mind is not only within beings. The human beings are very basic of nature existence is a mind for consciousness.
Yeah, we can certainly see within animals this kind of planning and. Okay, shall we go up? Would you like to read?
Right below it, it had no inward look. Right. A backward scholar on logic's rickety bench, indoctrinated by the erring sense. It took appearance for the face of God, for casual lights the marching of the suns, for heaven a starry strip of doubtful blue, aspects of being feigned to be the whole. There was a voice of busy interchange, a marketplace of trivial thoughts and acts, a life soon spent, a mind a body's slave. Here seemed the brilliant crown of nature's work, and tiny egos took the world as means to sate a wild dwarf lusts and brief desires. In a death-closed passage saw life start and end, as though a blind alley were creation's sign, as if for this the soul had coveted birth in the wonderland of a self-creating world and the opportunities of cosmic space.
Thank you. Here he clearly seems to be referring now to human beings and still a kind of a limited, rudimentary kind of intelligence. Backward scholars on logic's rickety bench, indoctrinated by the erring sense, still relying on the senses, like science depends on sense data in order to formulate its sense of reality. But the senses are also erring, they also mistake. And it's taking appearances for the deeper truth. There's this busy interchange of minds, a marketplace of trivial thoughts and acts, a life soon spent, a mind the body's slave. The mind acts primarily in service of the body. He says, here seemed the brilliant crown of nature's work. This is mankind at this level of the sense mind, of mind dependent on the senses, as if this was the summit to which all of this creation was made. For this purpose, this was the crown. So he's kind of ridiculing that perspective. Here, these beings, these tiny egos, look at the world to use, to sate a while their dwarf lusts and brief desires. And in a death-closed passage, saw life start and end. They're not aware of that soul within which throws that hook to clutch eternity, keeping the link with past and future births. It's not aware of that inner self. It doesn't look within yet. It's absorbed in the outer scene. And these last lines are interesting in that Sri Aurobindo gives us a sense of the greater possibilities of existence in the wonderland of a self-creating world and the opportunities of cosmic space. We have these vaster opportunities of our existence which we ignore and just become absorbed in these small little desires and outward appearances and aims.
What is rickety?
Rickety, it's shaky, it's makes sounds when you sit on this bench because it's all kind of loose. Naren?
Is creature passionate only to survive, fettered to puny thoughts with no wide range, and to the body's needs and pangs and joys, is fire growing by its fuel's death, increased by what it seized and made its own. It gathered and grew and gave itself to none. Only it hoped for greatness in its den, and pleasure and victory in small fields of power, and conquest of life room for self and kin, an animal limited by its feeding space. It knew not the immortal in its house, it had no greater, deeper cause to live. In limits it was powerful. Acute to capture truth for outward use, its knowledge was the body's instrument. Absorbed in the little works of its prison house, it turned around the same unchanging points, the same circle of interest and desire, but thought itself the master of its jail. Although for action, not for wisdom made, thought was its apex, or its gutter's rim. It saw an image of the external world and saw its surface self, but knew no more.
Thank you. Let's pause. Last time I had mentioned that there are several different levels of meaning, of understanding what we're reading here. And one is that he's describing these subtle planes of existence. the subtle worlds, and the beings who live there. So there is this realm of existence in which these beings live, in which this principle is predominant. This is the characteristic of those worlds. He calls them typal worlds because they're fixed on a particular type. And in this world here that he's describing, they're fixed at this particular level. So that's one way of understanding this. Aswapati is traveling through these inner worlds and is describing what he sees there. But at another level, these worlds also have an influence and press for expression in our world. So they also influence us here in this material world on earth. And so we feel their influences and we feel their presence within our own lives. They become a part of our makeup, of who we are. We're more complex. We have higher levels of our being that we may be conscious of as well, but we also have this level that we can be conscious of. And we feel expressing, pushing for expression in our own lives. And then there's still another level, I think, that there are different levels of humanity. Some people are more evolved than others. So some individuals are more or less at this level, have only developed this more rudimentary mind, are still not looking within or looking above to their higher possibilities, or looking beyond the senses or their outer life, but are just concerned with their little circumstances, creating a little world for themselves within their narrow scope. So we can look at this in these three different ways. This passage in particular, it seems to strike something that we can recognize in ourselves, I think.
But the last thing you said, that there are different levels here.
Yeah.
It often made me think about these universes. But there are some people say, some scientists say there are several universes or parallel universes. And the parallel universes, actually, they are already here.
Yeah. Yeah, in some sense, Sri Aurobindo's description of these subtle planes of existence are like these parallel universes. No? And yet all of these worlds come together in some ways in our world. So we have influences from all of these different planes of existence here on earth. We have these very rudimentary life impulses working within us, but then we can look at the worms or there's levels of that nature here in our world. The single-celled organisms, which are just moving and can barely sense the things around them, or the worms crawling in the mud, So we have all of these things, but they're also within people. We have all these levels operating within us.
Not for everybody, because we know what's not there to be.
Yeah, we have higher parts of our being that we can access. And also these higher planes of existence are also pressing on us for expression.
Fettered means chained. Fettered.
Fettered is,
Chained.
yeah, chained, limited,
Puny.
tied up.
Puny. Small.
Puny, very small.
Interesting, I for me the light also increased by what it sees and made its own music growing of the soul or this ego. It's here described.
Yeah, it's the growing ego. It tries to create some space around itself to become master of its little world.
And he speaks about this fire.
And that's how it grows. That's how the being develops. So it's a necessary stage.
What is this fire?
Which fire?
This fire growing by its fuse depth.
Oh. Yeah, it's that fire can be aspiration, something growing within in the soul. You were going to say something?
Yeah, maybe what I took from it was that life eats life, and life feeds on life.
Yeah,
it's just by the death of what it eats.
Yeah.
So it expands its scope by eating its surroundings.
Right.
It seems to make lots of references to our limitations.
Yeah.
Balcony, letter,
Yeah.
prison house, absorbing work, low self.
You can continue if you have more.
He seems to make lots of references to our limitations,
Yeah.
mistakes,
Yeah.
better,
Yeah.
prison house.
Yeah.
The human little works that we observe ourselves with our family before we see outside the state. Well,
Yeah. Yeah, an animal limited by its feeding space. That kind of describes it, puts it in a nutshell.
But this fire, so you think it's a fire of aspiration?
Well,
No, here he thinks we are living a life which is for lust and desire only. To this stage, he's saying this life is starting with birth and ending with death, and we enjoy life and have our satisfaction and desires.
but the thing is that there is a soul within this, which is gradually growing. It's limited. It's very limited in its expression. But something is growing within this nature. This soul is there. And I think that fire within, it's from that soul that's growing within. But at this point, it's still very rudimentary, so it expresses itself through life and through feeding on others and dying. And
yeah, there's something paradoxical. Because normally the fire dies when it's fueled, it dies. And this fire grows by its fuel.
So that would suggest something more, right? That might be then the soul grows even through the body's death, even through the body's experiences of struggle and all the suffering that it goes through in this limited life, and even feeding on others and doing whatever it has to do to survive. It's growing through that experience.
And within the Canto itself, already the evolution you can see.
Yeah. So the mind has come out. Thought was its apex, or its gutter's rim. So thought is the apex, but here it's still only a very low level, so it's just the rim of a gutter almost. It saw an image of the external world, and it saw its surface, outer being, but it knew no more. Still could not see within, still could not imagine more beyond or in the future. Shall we continue? Can we come to Sudanya? Down here.
Out of a slow, confused, embroiled self-search, mind grew to a clarity cut off his eyes. A gleam enclosed in a stone ignorance, in this bound thinking's narrow leaderships, tied to the soul, inspired by common things, attached to a confined familiar world, amid the multitude of her motivate plots, her changing actors, and her millions marks. Life was a play monotonously the same. There were no vast perspective of the spirit, no swift invasions of unknown delight, no golden distances of white release. This petty state resembled our human days, but fixed to eternity of changeless tide. A moment's movements doomed to the last through time. Existence this link spanned the inconscient gulf. The half-illumined buildings in a mist, which form a void of form, arose to sight, and jutted out into a void of soul. A little light in a great darkness born, life knew not where it went, nor whence it came. Around all floated still the Nissan's haze. End of Canto 4.
So what was its apex, or its gutter's ring?
So a gutter is something dug in to the earth for like a channel of water. So the rim of that, the top rim of that. So it's a very low summit, let's say. So it's a little bit of humor in a sense. We look at thought, our present thought, as something great, but then he says, he brings it back down to its proper level. It's just the gutter's rim.
I thought a gutter was around the roof for the rain.
Well, that's also a gutter, yes.
It's a very low, it's from the lowest point where the water goes. Not from there you go to the side.
Here he brings out another image. Mine grew to a clarity, cut out, precise, a gleam enclosed in a stone ignorance. So again, there's this light of mind, but it's still enclosed within this hard ignorance. And then he describes it in terms of being tied to the soil, tied to earth, tied to outer appearances of things, always circling around among the same images, the same ideas, the same movements of life. The same plots as in a play. Life was a play monotonously the same. I was yeah. Yeah, it's as if there's a million people, they all living that same type of life, though. They're all moving in the same plot. So no freedom, no vast perspectives of the spirit, no swift invasions of unknown delight, no golden distances of wide release. Then there's this line that comes, which reminds me of something we were talking about last week. So this petty state resembled our human days, but fixed to eternity of changeless type. So I was describing that one level of the meaning is these worlds, these typal worlds, which are fixed. And here he uses an eternity. They're fixed for eternity. We were wondering whether those worlds would be transformed and supramentalized. And I did try to look into Sri Aurobindo's writings a little bit to see if I could find something. There wasn't much at all on this subject that I could find. I read kind of through this chapter of the worlds in the Life Divine. I couldn't find anything about it. But there was one small letter where apparently somebody asked him whether the cosmic worlds would change with the supramental descent. And he says, well, not entirely, because that's not our business.
Not entirely?
That they would not entirely change. He maybe gave some scope for some change within those realms. I imagine that one of the things that was in that longer chapter where he didn't address the question was that all of these systems of worlds, he emphasizes that they're not unrelated, that they're certainly related to our world, and as we've seen, they're always pressing for expression in our world. So they are tied in a kind of a system with our world. They're not independent completely. So he emphasizes that, and I imagine that to the extent or to those aspects of those worlds which are in interaction with our world, that maybe some change would occur there. But for the most part, I think those worlds are independent. They have their own principle. See, each one is a type of expression of the divine at a particular level. So the divine doesn't express itself in one way. It expresses itself in a multitude of ways. And so our world is just one way. This evolutionary world is one way of the divine expressing itself in nature. But in the mental world, it expresses itself in another way. In the vital world, another way. In the subtle physical world, another way. So it expresses itself in this variety of different ways. And just because something is happening here in our world doesn't necessarily translate immediately to those worlds.
In our discussion, we were, deep into the interconnection and the unity, the one in many problem. And then I think the analogy for these worlds is better what people talk about now, frequency, sound and vibration. So, and light spectrum. So, there are all these levels, but they all in a certain sense contain the other levels, but they're different, but they're still connected.
I remember in some discussion said only this part is changeable. And in other planes insert their influences on us, and they live through like their inspiration. They live through the human beings. But on that particular level, there is not much change as I understand. Other planes, let's say higher beings or higher existences, they act through us. They try to influence human beings, but they themselves, that plane is not affected. To make any change in themselves, individually or in this earth, they act here. But there remains the same. That's the beauty of this human existence, that I understood that way. We had a discussion about this as well.
If I may say so, this question in its absolute highest reality, the truth of the question is a supramental question because it involves creation, and that will come through time as we evolve.
Yeah.
To get at the fundamental truth of it, what we're all wondering is what are the other worlds? Is there an actual world that we can fly to and land on, as they say we have done with the moon? Can we fly to other lands and land on them, as they say we have done with Mars? But that, in a sense, is physicality of things. We're still coming at the brinks of science and spirit are fairly forming right now. So the truth of the matter is that man is just playing with knowledge right now in the form of in the ways of outer space. So that, in essence, it's a supramental question because creation is a supramental question in its truth and highest state.
Yeah, I think that. Okay, go ahead.
To come back to what you said, this does not change, it changes here. But if we think what Auroville and the mother say, that the source of all is the one, and as it goes down, it becomes more and more distorted and twisted and false. But if the basis changes and evolves, I was suddenly wondering whether it would not have an effect, a retroback effect on us, and the forces which are influencing us would rediscover their source also.
Well, that's the question that we're.
So they will change also.
Satchidanand, he is practical this thing, but he's not affected. I mean, he's trying to learn and live through our experiences. That is another thing. But other planes I'm talking about. At the highest level, yes. Satchidanand level or divine level, but other planes of existence I would like to
Yeah, I think that's the main point, that we can kind of speculate about these things, but it's actually far beyond our mind. We can look what Sri Aurobindo says about it. He has a deeper insight into it, and we can try to get some clues. And in any case, it's a little bit beyond our scope. It's not really our business. Our business, as Sri Aurobindo, I think, even mentions in that letter, is to transform ourselves, to work on ourselves, and create that possibility of the supramentalization here. And then what happens afterwards, that's a subsequent issue. So let's stop there for today.
महत्तदुर्वं सविरं तथासित् येनाविष्टितः प्रविवेशितापः विश्वाय पश्यामि बहुधा ते अग्ने जातवेदस्तन्नो देवैकः यच्छाम त्वा बहुधा जातवेदः प्रविष्टमग्ने अप्सुषधीषु तं त्वायमो यचिकेतचित्रभानो दशान्तरुष्यात् यतिरोचमानम्
in the enigma of the dark and vast, in the passion and self-loss of the infinite, when all was plunged in the negating void, non-being's night could never have been saved if being had not plunged into the dark, carrying with it its triple mystic cause.
महत्तदुल्वं सविरं तथासित येनाविष्टितः प्रविवेशितापः विश्वाय पश्यामि बहुधा ते अग्ने जातवेदस्तन्नो देवैकः गच्छाम त्वा बहुधा जातवेदः प्रविष्टमग्ने अप्सूषधीषु तं त्वायमो यचिकेतचित्रभानो दशान्तरुष्यात् यतिरोचमानम्
Thanks to Shri Aurobindo.